People say they don't like negative campaigning. They don't like a poke in the eye with a sharp stick, but they're going to remember it, aren't they?
Well, hello then, I do hope you're all well. Nowadays, shocking Labour attack ads, just really good politics. Well, that was what James O'Brien had devoted an hour of his time on LBC to talk about, where he received some very interesting and unusual views and opinions. Well, he received a caller who you could say had skin in the game, called Allan, I think he was from Wandsworth, who had something very, very interesting to say.
At least that's my opinion. Alan's in Wandsworth. Alan, what would you like to say?
I agree completely.
Well, what do you know?
Well, I do know because I worked for the Labour Party for a good number of years. In the run-up to the 1997 general election, I was Director of Campaigns and Elections for the Labour Party, and I still knock around a little bit around the world of politics and
so that's me told. That's me told. That makes you Allan Barnard.
Yes, exactly right, yes. This stuff, there is no depth the Tories won't go to. The Labour Party went high for many, many, many years, and we lost and lost and lost and lost. And when we started to learn to mix it a little bit, we started to have more of a chance. And Keir Starmer's mixing it now. I was getting a little bit frustrated listening to, as you say, the naivety of some of the contributions. This is political rough and tough. The Tories just should not be allowed to get away with what they're getting away with. And it is part of healthy political debate for opposition parties to point out their failings. Rishi Sunak can come out and say, he can come out and defend his Conservative Party's record, of which he is now the leader and the country's Prime Minister. If he doesn't agree with what Labour is saying about whether it's the historic paedophile jailings or whatever it might be, he can come out and defend himself. Look, he's a big man. Well, actually, he isn't. But he can come out and defend himself if he wants to, can't he? He can come out and say, you're wrong there, Mr. Starmer, and this is why you're wrong. But I haven't heard him say that yet.
No, and there's plenty of time for him to do so. Were you surprised by the tone, particularly of the original one that you mentioned, with the reference to child sexual abuse, but then also by the doubling down from Keir Starmer in the Daily Mail of all places, saying that he will give absolutely zero apologies for the choice of personal messaging and imagery?
Good for Keir Starmer.
But were you surprised? Did you, I mean, to coin a phrase, Alan, did you know he had it in him?
Well, Keir Starmer is a good man. I think he's come into politics for good reasons. I think he's come into politics to make the world a better place, according to how he thinks that should be. And actually, it's quite refreshing to see people in politics doing things like that, after all the grifting we've seen in recent times by the current incumbents. So I think it's quite good. And to a certain extent, I suppose I should applaud people's surprise that he's done it, because it does show that they think Keir Starmer is a good man, and I think he is. However, he will remain a good man in opposition unless we start mixing it.
It does. You see it that simply. You've got to get the gloves off at some point. The turning up for a gunfight with a pair of old boxing gloves and a copy of the Queensberry Rules isn't going to butter any parsnips.
There was a fantastic phrase by a man called James Carville, you may have heard of. He was very helpful to Bill Clinton's campaign. In fact, in 1992, I went over to observe and give a little hand to the Clinton campaign. I went to California with a specific intention of learning a few tricks. One of the things I came back to talk about, I didn't go on my own. I went with a couple of very good colleagues, but I came back to say, look, what we call as negative campaigning, it works, I'm afraid to say. And I don't like it. Of course I don't like it. I'd far rather us be able to win the battle on the moral high ground, but that's not how life works. People say they don't like negative campaigning. They don't like a poke in the eye with a sharp stick, but they're going to remember it, aren't they?
They certainly are.
It's rather easier. Imagine I'm coming out saying, look, here's my 16-point healthcare plan.
Yes.
And the Tories say, that geezer's going to put your taxes up. What are people going to remember?
What they're going to take away from it. It's odd, as you speak, I read some lines written today by the chief executive of something called Conservative Home. He says, there is no use whining when your opponent does something you wish they hadn't. Indeed, whining about it in this instant actively helps them. So you're on the same page, I think.
I think it's fantastic. I've been dancing a jig all weekend.
Allan Barnard or Allan in Wandsworth, whichever you prefer. Many thanks indeed. I think we might keep Alan's number on file as well, actually. Some fascinating insights there.
Yes, Allan Barnard also sent in a very interesting quote saying, "It is very hard for the other guy to hit you when your fist is in his face." Now, I will say straight off the bat, I'll be honest, not my cup of tea is this type of politics. I find it quite tasteless. But I also remember finding the Breaking Point poster with Farage and all them Syrian refugees in that poster quite tasteless. But I know plenty of people who found it quite tasty. And I also understand what he means by when he said, a poke in the eye is going to be quite memorable. Well, you're not going to forget that in a hurry, are you? I do think he has a point, though, when he's talked about this explanation about a 16-point plan, maybe to save the National Health Service. And when the other guy will say he's going to put up your taxes, I think he has a point there. But I thought he had some very interesting takes. But what do you guys think? Is Allan right? Should they be doing more of these attack ads? Was Keir right to double down? Or they shouldn't go down this route at all and should aim higher and maybe get out of the gutter with this type of dirty politics? What do you guys think? Let me know down below. Until the next time, I shall bid you farewell and take care, my friends.